Hi, welcome back to Rise and Thrive on the More Network, powered by Brown Harris Stevens. I'm your host, Daniella Schlisser, and for those of you joining us for the first time, Rise and Thrive is a motivational podcast series centered around how we and you overcome life's many obstacles and the beauty, challenges, and rewards of both professional and personal rebirth. This series is one that is deeply personal to me and inspired in great part by my own journey. And so in that light, we decided to flip the script for this third episode and take you through the obstacles that have shaped my process of reinvention in the hopes that the lessons I've learned can in some way be useful to you. And so, without any further ado, I'd like to introduce my good friend and fabulous sales director, Doug Williford, who's going to be taking the wheel today.
Daniella, I'm so glad we're doing this today.
Me too.
This is
Me
great.
too.
Let's just get started. You know, we've been lucky enough to be coworkers and friends for a while, and you've been a successful broker for the last 20 plus years here in New York City.
23.
23, right? 2001?
2001.
There we go. What were you doing? You clearly didn't start in real estate. What was your life before real estate like?
I have a degree in political science. I worked for the Associated Press straight out of college. And then I launched the Ralph Lauren store in Paris, and then moved to New York, worked for the Anti-Defamation League, which was, again, more in line with the degree that I had. And then when I started having children, at a certain point, I stopped working. I took a break to focus on child raising and so forth. And I became a broker in 2001 because I had inherited a significant amount of money when my father passed away. I was an only child, lived alone with my father, and he passed away in 1981. And as it turns out, my husband, with whom I have my 3 children, stole all that money. And so, yes. So I woke up one day with 3 children and absolutely no money. And that's how I became a broker, which was completely outside of, both my educational wheelhouse and my experience. But it was the only thing I could come up with that would be lucrative enough to support 3 children and also give me the flexibility I needed to raise 3 children by myself.
Sure.
So that's how I became a broker.
Can you walk us through that, about how that came to you, what the
Sure.
and exactly
Sure.
what
Yeah.
happened, what transpired?
So I didn't really have much of an inkling, but I started getting phone calls. So what my ex did was he took money as investment, pretending that it was investment. So he had people investing with him, me first, and then I think once he got through all of my millions, he is probably when he started doing it with others. And would pretend it was for investment, but it was actually just how he paid for life. It turns out he has never confirmed this, but I'm quite confident that he didn't make any money when we were married. I'm pretty confident that he just hit people up for investments in things, in projects and ventures that didn't really exist. So that's how my money got lost, is, he would propose certain investments to me, a plot of land here and a modeling agency there, and invest in this, and this sounds great. And I did not have the very basic wisdom to ask for any paperwork, bring in an attorney, nothing. Absolutely nothing. I just said, oh, okay, and just wrote check after check after check. So, that's something that's been part of the public speaking that I've done to women's groups, is, and I think, it has been around the taboo of talking about money, that stereotypical socialization of women, which is thankfully far less the case today than it was back then. But, to trust and blindly trust. And of course, we don't know what you know. You men are just born with some kind of, phenomenal financial wisdom
Clearly.
that we never, so I actually did that. I work hard to forgive myself for it. But yeah. And The other people, however, whom he conned were not as naive as I was and were not as forgiving. Not that I ever forgave him for it, but I didn't pursue him for it. And they came after him. So he was tried and found guilty of, embezzlement and what have you, and a whole bunch of stuff. And then there was, cross-state.
Sure.
Yeah, it was intense.
A lot of laws were.
Yes, many laws were broken. So he went to prison.
That must have affected your trust in other people. I know if it were me.
What trust in us?
I know. There we go. If it were me, I would have a hard time trusting people moving
Yes.
forward. Did you find that's the case?
Yes, for a long time. Yes, it's. I have healed from it. Somewhat now, probably not 100%. It did make me a better broker. It did, because I think I would have been, I can sniff someone who is, full of it.
Sure.
Super well
You're
now.
much more skeptical.
Yes, much more. But yeah, for many years, both raising the children who were so young and that issue with trust, or that lack of trust, kept me in a very somewhat removed space from within new relationships. Yeah. I was fortunate that I had these very old relationships where trust was, was never questioned. So I did have people around me whom I thoroughly trusted. Yeah. And that did not impact my trust there. But yeah, with new people, or men specifically, I kept things
I could see
somewhat distanced, yes. And over the years, now it's been over 20 years. It's been 22 years since that, dark day, and it's been 20 since we're actually divorced. I think I both trust but it's not just like I got over it. It's also you learn, so it's not simply time has healed a mistrusting scar. It's also that I trust myself more now to see through nonsense and be able to, determine that somebody is worthy of my trust.
Yeah, you're just wiser,
so both,
smarter.
Yes,
yeah.
Exactly. So I think both happen.
Do you still? Do you find that there are moments in life as you move forward that you come across like remnants of that? Do you ever? Are there things that situations that surprise you that come at you when you're like?
It's not so much the trust piece. I feel that has worked itself out, and time is healed, and I feel more confident. But yeah, when financial insecurity triggers that same fear. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. If I have, even in the business, this business is commission-based and we have zero security. So when things are slow, it wakes me up at night. Even though I've been in it for so long and my business, thank God, is solid. When there are dips, I will wake up in that very familiar, anxious space that, what if I can't take care of this, and what if I can't take care of that, and am I back there again?
Does that put you into the same sort of like mode as it did back then? Does it put you into the same sort of like process mode of like what's
somewhat.
the next step? What's
yes,
the next step?
Yes, absolutely. The same. That scar triggers the same fear, and the fear triggers the same tool.
Yeah.
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes. It'll make me, go back to work, want to stay at my desk until 1 a.m. And yes. It puts me in the same hamster wheel.
Yeah. But that's a great response. It's a healthy response to
I think so, because it's problem solving still, Yeah.
Because I think there's two ways to go, right? I think there's either the rug is pulled out from under you and you just feel like you're in free fall.
Yeah.
Or you go into matrix mode, which is what my brain does sometimes when I'm in a stressful situation. I find that kind of slows down and you find yourself just like thinking, what do I do next?
Yeah.
How do I get to the next stop?
That's exactly how I experienced it. Definitely matrix mode. Like, okay, that, this is no longer my reality. So where do we go?
And you went to that quickly.
Extremely quickly.
Oh.
Yeah. I remember the moment when I discovered it. It was a very dear friend who suspected something was off and insisted that I look through my ex-husband's checkbook and said he would do it. And I thought, I can't do that. That's terribly invasive. And one doesn't do that, because I was raised with a whole bunch of one doesn't do. And he said, no, you really need to. I can tell you need to. And I will be on the phone with you when you do it.
That's a good friend.
And then he's a lovely guy. And it was all, then it was all right there. And I became brilliant suddenly after being very foolish for quite some time.
This beautiful set here at Studio 1873 is brought to you by the Everet. The Everet provides full-service staging and furniture rental solutions in the New York area. We work with Brown Harris Stevens and many other top real estate firms, staging their homes to sell quickly and at the highest price possible. Our staging is affordable without sacrificing quality or design. For more information, please visit us at staging.theeverset.com or email us at staging@theeverset.com to request a free proposal.
What were those next steps when you looked at this and said, okay, this is no longer my reality. This is my new reality. How did you sort of process to the next step and the next step? Did you focus on personal first and then it led to ultimately professional? Or did you just focus on how do I continue moving forward?
Yeah, that's interesting. I never paused to think about that. Well, I did immediately tell my ex-husband I would be divorcing him and that I knew and that I would do that when I had the financial means to do that and I was going to be getting a job and we would live together until I could afford to divorce him and have a home of my own and so forth and so on. And not that there was any money anywhere, but it was kind of like, all right, we're both going to have to collaborate on this lifeboat, but make no mistake, I'm out of here. What I am creating for myself and our children is a life, and I will divorce you when I have that. Yeah. And then I did, it's funny because I knew, what I had done previously is not lucrative. It was riveting, but it was not lucrative. Working against right-wing extremism for the ADL was fabulous.
Gratifying.
But not lucrative. Yeah. So I forgot what it's called. Myers-Briggs, is that what it's called?
Myers-Briggs, yes.
It had me as clergy. And I thought...
I was an ENFP, by the way.
You were?
I still remember this. I don't know why I remember that, but I took the same thing.
So in other words, it's flawed. It's flawed.
Pretty much.
But that's what it gave me, and I thought, because I didn't even know where to begin. Yeah. I thought, so I began with that. All right, what am I going to do? So it was all very, I was trying to be pragmatic.
Sure.
And clergy, wasn't going to work
wasn't
anymore.
Wasn't going to be the one.
No.
Was not going to be the one.
And I just started thinking which profession. I knew I needed flexibility to take care of my kids, and I needed money to take care of my kids.
Did you have any other family here? I'm sorry, but
I'm an only child. Yeah. My ex-husband, all my family's in Vienna. My mother, my aunt, and my uncle, that's the extent of my very immediate family. Because I'm also my aunt and uncle never had children, so I'm everyone's only child. Right. And they were all in Vienna. And my ex-husband had conned them as well. So they were angry at me for quite some time. Not my mother, but my aunt and uncle were angry at me for quite some time for having brought him into the family. Sure. So they didn't help. My mother has been living off what she inherited at the age of, I think, 28 or something like that, or 38, her whole life. So she, is fortunate to take care of herself, but she couldn't help. So no, there was no one.
That must have felt very solitary at the time, right? Like it must have felt very much like you were just, it's just you.
Yes, yes.
That may seem obvious.
Yes,
but
it did. And it did. I think the upside of that, or not the upside, there's no upside. There's no upside. I think the kind of sink or swim moment where I don't think I felt I had the luxury to feel much. Right. The feeling came after. Sure. And by the time it comes, the upside of the feeling coming after, while I am confident it's not mentally healthy per se, but it does sort of like Shiva.
Sure.
When there's, loss in Judaism, that cushion where you are distracted from feeling anything, I think makes the feeling a little bit easier by the time you feel it.
Sure. And also just having no other choice at that
yes,
point. I mean,
there were no choices. Agreed.
It could have been more distracting or delayed things if you'd said, well, I could depend on these people or these people, or I could do it myself. In this case,
agree with you.
You just have the one thing, right?
Yes.
Like, this is it. This is me.
Yes.
Yeah.
Plus, I had very young children. My oldest was 10. Then my daughter was 7, and my son was 1. My youngest was 1. So there were also people to take care of and be, well demeanored and fun and sane for. So there was really there was no space within which.
No. And the stakes were raised. The stakes couldn't have been higher at that point,
exactly,
right?
Exactly. And that was all very distracting in a way that I guess we're all different that way, but I think I thrived from having to, not fall apart.
Thing for you.
Yes.
So how did you land then, or did you land immediately? I don't even know.
I did immediately.
Did you land on real estate immediately?
Immediately.
Okay.
Immediately, because I think I knew enough, and I don't really know how, but I knew enough to know that there weren't professions that I was aware of that were full-time, that were flexible and lucrative other than this. I think I knew enough. I had had real estate people as friends of family and that kind of thing. So I knew that what interested me and was very lucrative would not be flexible.
Sure.
And that what was flexible would not be lucrative.
Correct.
And this was all I could come up with that was both lucrative and flexible. So I called a very dear family friend and I told him what had happened, and I said, this has happened, and I think I'm going to go into real estate. And he's a big real estate developer. And I asked him for advice, and he said, well, you need to go into residential rather than commercial, because commercial won't be flexible. You'll only get the flexibility of time in residential. And he made an introduction to Barbara Corcoran for me. He said, go get your license. So he gave me the steps. Once I had the concept, he said, you're going to need a license, get your license, and I will introduce you to Barbara Corcoran.
That's great advice.
And that's how that happened.
That's good. And so you started with Corcoran then?
I started with Corcoran.
The Barbara days.
Yes, in the Barbara days.
Yeah.
Which was, a nice time to start. She was super interesting.
Was she a mentor of yours? Was she
wasn't really a mentor. I didn't have a mentor.
Oh, interesting.
I didn't have a mentor. I don't know if that wasn't done yet in 2001, but I didn't have a mentor. I took the course. I passed the exam. I then took the Corcoran training course, and then I just worked my ass off. I mean, literally. I remember I would take my kids to the school bus at 8 a.m., and my ex would watch the 1-year-old. And I would come to the office. I was always the first person there and the last person leaving. I didn't have the 1-year-old yet.
Oh.
Yes, I didn't have when we finally split up, then I had the 1-year-old. I didn't have the 1-year-old when I went for when I had enough money for him to move out, by then I had the 1-year-old.
So
I was pregnant.
To add to this
story, yes, by the way, yes.
You had 2 kids and you were pregnant
and I was pregnant. Yes,
so
there's that. Yes.
Nothing.
No, yes.
Nothing stressful here.
No.
No reason to be stressful at all. So when you were going in the office and working your ass off for those first months, and what were you doing? Like, how did you spend your time? How did you focus?
I'm very organized, and I always was organized, methodical. So at the beginning, when I started at Corcoran, there was a training manager named Mitchell Lawrence, who advised us all, which is something I now advise new people because it was excellent advice. He advised us to get all our systems in place while we are new and have little business, because once we have business, we won't have time to do that.
Great advice.
So I did everything. I would get there at 8. I would leave, 10, 11. I mean, on many nights, not every night, but many nights. And I created my marketing plan, my showing log, everything that required a template and was a system I would later need. And I also took over the small business from a broker who never came in, whom I never met in person.
Oh, really?
But but a manager told me that she was looking for a new broker to take over her million and under business. And she would get a referral fee. I think it was 25 or 30% for that. So she would just forward me all of her new business via email, and I would follow up with it. Yeah, and that's how I did my first deals.
Oh, that's really fantastic.
Yep.
So, I guess the experience that you had before coming here with like having even all of that experience that you had before in your other careers came into being a process-oriented person that could sit down and focus there.
And a personality type.
Yeah.
Capricorn. Very Capricorn.
Very Capricorn experience. Yeah. Was it hard to focus on, would you find that the situation made it harder or easier to focus or on just getting this business set up? I asked that because there are a lot of people that get started and they, even without the extreme circumstances behind them, they don't know how to move themselves forward and they kind of languish. Did you find that this drive that this has to get started affected you then, or was that just
I think existential need. I think it's I think my personality tackled an existential crisis and need in that pragmatic way.
Interesting.
Yes. Yes.
So that did drive you forward.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. I didn't pause on how it felt.
Yeah. How long did it take you to get that first deal once you started the business?
Well, I started in July of 2001. By the spring of 2003, by the spring of 2003, my manager came to me and said, "You need an assistant. You can't keep doing what you're doing by yourself." Yeah. And and at that same moment, I told my ex around that, I've got enough going that I can pay for us to get divorced and pay for an additional apartment. It was a little bit after that. It was, a couple of months later.
Yeah. I'm somehow picturing that as like a moon launch with the first stage booster going off at that point, right?
I think it felt
like,
that way.
Yeah, sort of like now you're ready to
I think it felt that
move
way.
on.
Yeah.
That's great.
And
so that was 2 years after you got started.
Yes.
You were able to sort of make the next step
Yes.
which was in your plan to move on.
Yes.
That's
yes.
great.
Yes.
Did you get that assistant, and did that make a difference?
I did. It did.
Yeah.
I did, and yes, it did. Her name was Adrienne Gratry. Lovely young woman who is now a broker in, I want to say, Connecticut.
Oh.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. How did you build your business from taking over the business from the agent who was sort of, beyond $1 million and grow from that little kernel, right? I mean, that's more than a kernel. That's a really nice.
It was a great.
That's a nice gift to have.
Yes,
early
it was
on in your
great.
career.
It was great, and I think I actually paid her more than 25%. I think it was 30 or 35. I did, I think 2 or 3 deals with her, but every time I did a deal, I did not. Our agreement was a referral structure, which is the classic agreement on the first deal. I didn't have to pay her on subsequent deals that I would do from that first lead. It was just on the first
deal. It was your business
deal.
once you did the first deal, it was yours.
So I just really, I tried to maximize the potential of each deal I did within that, referral partnership with her. So I would immediately, from every deal, and they say, every deal should bring you 3 more. So I did mailers. I also did a tremendous amount in those first 2 years. And it's something I wish I had more time to do now. I did every weekend. I went door to door to for sale by owner properties and open houses to try and garner the.
So face to face with the for sale by owners.
Yes.
Oh, nice.
Yes.
Were you looking for open houses at for sale by owners?
Only.
Is that what you're doing?
So I took the newspaper every Saturday. Remember the physical newspaper?
Yep.
Remember the real estate section had for sale by owner, open house advertisements. Yep. I would circle all the for sale by owner advertisements. I would then go into the system to learn about the building and trades in the building. And I would make a schedule for myself. So my ex-husband watched the kids, all 3 of them, because by then there was the third.
The third. Yes.
Every Sunday. And I would just go door to door and start talking to sellers who were running their own open houses and say stuff like, that I had informed myself on. Are you aware of this sale in the building? That your same line sold for this on that floor. And I got listings like that.
That's great.
Yeah.
And doing it face to face.
And I wish I could do that, more of that. I do it sometimes, but super rarely, and I wish I did it more.
Yeah, the one-on-one work is...
It does, and really it's exhilarating, and you have to, I think one of the things that propelled me also was the satisfaction of success.
Yeah.
You jump in, and I think with anything, and you're not sure you can do it, and it's something you want, and stakes are high, whether they're personal or professional or whatever, and you start to get that sense of success or personal growth. It's not big success at first, but you can tell you're learning, and you can tell you're advancing, and you can tell you're getting closer and closer to where you want to be, and that's super satisfying.
Yeah, there's a tangible.
Yes.
You're not just, you're actually in front of this person having a negotiation, and you can feel the win when it happens, right?
Agreed.
So you've now moved on to the next stage of your life with sort of like moving on your own. Your ex-husband is now having his own life. Did you find that at that point your business has changed your personal life? Did you made friends that have come into through your business?
Tremendously.
I would think that would be the case.
Yes.
Right? I would think that would be a way to, besides the obvious of propelling yourself forward, you've now got this sort of support group that now can help you move forward.
Absolutely.
It feels like that would be the case.
I'm very lucky in that I have the same 3 best friends since I'm 4 years old. So, and we were just, like I mentioned, we were just in Paris for our 60th birthday this past weekend. They were a constant. Yeah. They were also family. Their husbands were father figures to my children in the most beautiful way. So I'm lucky that I also had that continuum, and people who, we stayed at people's, at friends' homes every weekend and stuff. So I had a wonderful support system.
That's family too.
Yes,
that is,
and they are chosen family. Solid friendship.
Your business that you have today, your day-to-day business, comes from those connections you were making back in the first 5, 6, 7 years of your...
Oh, I have one apartment I've sold 4 times.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. For various owners, to various buyers, and then that buy becomes a next owner. And so, and most of my business is referral based. So there is a lot that, that becomes repeat. And what's interesting though is at the beginning, I rarely worked for friends because my friends knew how, green I was. Strangers didn't.
Right. Yes, that's true.
Now I have, do a lot of work for friends as well, because in the meantime, they think I know something. Yeah. But they knew I knew nothing back then. So they did not come with their, immensely important asset to me. They just wished me a lot of luck.
It's funny, one of my early mentors in this business used to say that your friends will disappoint you, but their friends will build your business, right? It's sort of like that's sort of...
I can see that. That's interesting. They're great now. Now they're all, very loyal. And even back then, I will say that the first deal I did for a personal friend was quite early, and he asked me to partner it. So I'm also a big believer in in general, knowing what you don't know. So when you're in it early, to partner with people who are in it for longer, because you're better off getting half of something than 100% of nothing.
Absolutely.
So I did that, and it was something that, as a result of this one old friend asking me to do that, it was something that I then came to offer.
Yeah. I just think in general, having a spirit of generosity in this business and being willing to say, I'll share this with you is a much better way to propel your business forward than to sort of try to hold all the cards.
Agreed.
Right?
I think that's a generalization as well. I can imagine that in any business.
Yeah.
And many businesses are competitive.
Yeah.
I just think I also believe in karma, and I think that there is much better karma to offering somebody a leg up or some help or some collaboration.
Sure.
What do you really need to know about buying or selling a home? First, it's serious business. And it's complicated. There's a lot of money on the table, and emotion too. You need an agent who knows the ropes. So, whether you're buying or selling your home, work with professionals who have a mastery of the craft.
To put some perspective or color on this or whatever, it's 2001. Mm-hmm. You're a single mom. Mm-hmm. You're a young woman in the city. Mm-hmm. Your support system has now turned out to be not a support system at all, but the rest of your family is nowhere around. How did you take stock of that? Like, how did that affect you on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I mean, it was brutal. It was certainly brutal and very raw. And I got very immersed in trying to come up with tools to make all of it work, to, figure out and succeed in a new career, take care of my kids, keep a happy home. I was angry at myself for having fallen into this very, 1950s female role where you just, fully trust your spouse and just sign anything that they ask you to sign or sign over anything that they ask you to sign over. So there was, I was angry at myself for having done that, which is part of how he and I get along actually very well now, because as angry, we've always gotten along well because I am, I had to divorce him, not not the man I wanted to be married to, but I also took on a lot of my, the blame personally. And I've done a lot of, quite a bit of public speaking in two women's organizations on that. But that whole space of, so the analysis was, kind of like you behaved like a 1950s housewife, and that's never going to happen again. I'm going to be informed on my finances. I'm going to make my own decisions, no matter how involved things ever are again with another person. Like there's information that I need command of. So I tackled that immediately and proceeded in a much more, it was somewhat of a brutal awakening. Sure. And that was very positively formative.
I'm impressed with that you were able to move from taking this and taking stock of what can I get from this, and how do I take this and make it a learning situation and move to the next thing?
Well, I felt there was no power in feeling like a victim, and I still feel that way. And it's something that I've told my kids when they would come back. Sometimes they'd come home and so did this, and or this happened to me, but it wasn't my fault. I always struggle with this happened to me, but it wasn't my fault. As I struggled with it as a parent, and I struggled with it personally. Right. Really primarily because how are you supposed to be able to create different outcomes for yourself if this happened to me and nothing, and it wasn't my fault, ergo I couldn't change it or do it differently moving forward in a way that is more successful for me. So I was always inclined toward that, thinking like, all right, let me think about what was my fault. Yeah. Let me think about what I did do wrong. Let me be honest with myself and take a painful accounting of what I should have and could have done differently.
Because there's nothing helpful on the other side, right? I can't do anything to make that person a better person. I can only focus on making myself a better person.
And I think that's something that people miss, and I was always very insistent that my children not miss it. I think, and I will say there's a lot in the experience that I had that I think people miss, that if I could share anything that's empowering, it would be these things. So I think, this was done to me doesn't get you to a better place. Thinking about how did I contribute, and how am I going to do that differently, and what will I never do again? Yeah. And I'm going to forgive myself for, what I did stupidly, but I'm never going to do that again. That gets you to a next place.
Yeah. Those are all important, by the way.
Yeah.
All of those pieces are important,
Yeah.
especially the forgiving yourself, because you can be analytical, do the soul searching,
Absolutely.
but then
Yes.
give
You
yourself
have to
some grace
forgive
at the end,
yourself,
right? Because you can't move past
Yes, you have to forgive yourself. I think you also have to embrace that. I have this little thing on my bulletin board in the office that says, trust the process. I think I actually typed it myself and then cut it out because I'm a big believer in that. Mm-hmm. You also have to assume that you couldn't have done it differently, really. You're going to want to do it. You have to identify what you did wrong, and you want to never do it that way again. Yeah. But you also have to, in that forgiveness, understand that you probably had to do it the way you had to do it to get from A to B to C. But the other thing that was very helpful at that time, which I think many people get wrong, is I was not at all private about what had happened to me. Huh. And I think people stay trapped in a very painful, secretive space. Yeah. And I think it's really hard and heavy and painful to keep what one thinks of as embarrassing secrets.
Because then you've got this sort of you've got a pressure cooker of both anger and then shame gets mixed in with that.
Exactly.
And it really is. It doesn't take you. It also does not take you to any place.
Exactly. And early on, my children asked me, because then my ex-husband went to prison. Right. Because he didn't only do that to me. I never pursued him, but other people did. And he ended up in prison. And my children said, what do we say when people ask us where our father is? And I said, prison. That's where he is. Yeah. Tell the truth. So there was a lightness, you take off that whole very heavy cloak of, so those are things I think in adversity. If there's anything I can look back on that I think is universal in my experience of a big bump in life would be, to try and think about what I did mistakenly and would do differently, and not being also, terribly private, toxically private about it.
That's very wise for someone. I mean,
I feel very fortunate that I tended toward that. Yeah. Because I can't say that everything clearly about me was wise. Yeah.
But you were younger.
But
so that's not knowledge that's always.
I did tend toward both those things, not being too private and trying to, understand.
So you were a mother when this was happening, and I know you've touched on the certain things with the kids. How did you find that you managed through that process of being a single mom suddenly and on a daily basis? Now, with your other struggles, I've talked with other folks about compartmentalizing. It's you have the stress over here in this relationship and the stress of the finance, but then you have these kids that you have to support and keep them happy and not stressed. Yes. How did you manage through that process?
A lot changed. Vacations, of course, didn't happen anymore, and new clothes and stuff like that didn't happen. I was lucky that I had friends who gave us, clothing or invited us to their homes for the weekend, so that kind of stuff happened. That was helpful, and I tried to, I did what I could with what I had. So, like, for example, I used to. And I really thought I had pulled this off. I used to take the kids to toy stores, and I would tell them, we'd go around with the shopping cart, and I would tell them to load whatever they like into the shopping cart. And I did this myself, too. So I don't remember which I did first, if I did it for them first or myself first. I can't remember. But when I would go shopping, I would do the same thing. Load everything in, and then before we got to the cash till, we would sit on the floor, all four of us, and look at everything that they had put in the shopping cart, and they could each pick one thing. And I also managed which stores we were going to so that it was affordable. Even the one thing was affordable.
Right.
But decades later, recently, within the past year, my daughter brought it up, and she's now 28. And she said something about, remember when we used to do that? And I said, yeah. And she said, we knew it was because you didn't have any money. And I was shocked because it felt joyful.
Sure.
No one said anything. Like, I think also the thing that I learned, which was a wonderful thing to learn, which I keep with me, is how much joy and fun is free, and or costs very little. And you miss that. You also you miss a lot of fun stuff with luxury. Luxury will take over a lot of things. Like sleeping all four of you in the Howard Johnson. If you can afford 2 rooms for 4 people, that's actually not as much fun as all 4 of you piling into one bed in a Hojo. That's more fun. So I also, a lot of what we had to do or what I had to do differently, or, I couldn't bring, if we were invited for dinner, I couldn't bring a store-bought gift anymore. So my daughter and I would bake a cake. It was fun.
Yeah.
So I managed, I've tried to figure out the creative way to avoid cost. And to think of it as fun rather than a punishment or a loss.
And focusing on that relationship versus focusing on the loss.
Definitely.
Did you feel that there was, or were you able to focus on the fact that there was a grieving process here? Because some of the things I've heard you mention so far in this conversation.
To be honest, not really. And I think that's probably something that I didn't do well.
Yeah. Is that true today, or is that true back then? I mean,
you mean in general? Am I good at grieving?
Do you feel like at this point you've grieved, or you just didn't focus on the grieving back then?
I feel that have I grieved? That's such an interesting question. I think and maybe this is also general. What am I really grieving? I mean, it's a loss of money. Thankfully, my kids are all okay. Yeah. I'm okay. I was able, with a lot of hard work, to develop a career that sustains me. So I think maybe I'm not sure what I would be grieving. I think I was good at anger. I think I was good at that. But I think one of the things it brings me to as I'm thinking about this, I think one of the things in adversity is also figuring out what warrants grieving. I don't know, I had an awful lot more money than I do now, for sure. Do I feel like my life is less joyful as a result, or no? And I can see lots and lots of upsides in what I went through. And I think, if you can take that out of a challenging experience, if you can say, I've accomplished more than I otherwise would have, and I know that to be true for myself. I was not on a path to accomplish, career-wise, what I have. That was born of necessity, and that's super satisfying. So yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have more money, but that wasn't my path, and I certainly see, I like myself better today than not that I disliked myself then, but, stuff was handed to me that I didn't have to create for myself. There's a lot of satisfaction and reward in creating something for oneself. So I think in, anybody, we look at obstacles or we look at bumps, and yes, you can sit in the, how was that taken from me? Or you can, be willing to see what it gave you.
Sure. If you're talking to people today, I know you speak to women's groups about these very topics. If you're talking to someone today who was in, at a glacial shift in their life and sort of like in the same position that you were then, what advice would you give them? Like what's the piece of advice you would give them from your position now?
Identify your sources of support. Let them be there for you. Be transparent and candid with them. Don't waste energy on, privacy or it's an air suck. Think about what you could have maybe done differently in this outcome, that led toward this outcome so that you don't, so that your path goes differently. Embrace that it was your path. Don't, people, the whole I should have left him sooner, I shouldn't have done this, I shouldn't have signed over, I shouldn't. It was your path and think about and try to be excited about where it takes you next, that you can mold differently. Think about your strengths. Think about what you're good at. Think about what you like doing. If you're at a redefinition of yourself professionally or otherwise, what do you enjoy? Don't do things that, don't target something that you don't enjoy or that doesn't feel right. There's so much that can be done within what we're each good at and like to do. Think about who can get you there. Like I hadn't spoken to the gentleman who introduced me to Barbara Corcoran in many years. Think about, and be willing to go and say, this happened to me, or this is where I am. Do you have any advice for me? Do you, let your village
help
you.
Lean into the village.
Yeah, and don't be hard on yourself. Take as much of the load off of yourself as you can by forgiving yourself, by, sharing where you actually are.
Yeah. Be kind to yourself. It's very important.
Yeah.
That's great advice.
Very.
Do you have one piece of advice that you would give to sort of?
I don't one piece. Do I have one piece?
I'm a Libra, so saying one piece of advice is always a big challenge for me in anything. But.
Yeah. I guess tomorrow is a new day. We all have, I think we all have the ability to, tomorrow's a clean slate. We can make it what we want. We can take one more step closer. It's not going to be everything we want overnight. Tomorrow isn't going to give us everything we want, but we can certainly step by step get closer, and we can do that tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And then go to bed tomorrow night and say, oh, I'm one step closer.
I think that's fantastic advice. Thanks for this opportunity.
Thank you. Thank you. It was fun.
It was fun.
Or always leaves your text on red. Leaves your text on red.
Built a corporate group with $1,000 loan.
Tell us a little bit about how you actually came from.
Welcome to the Build Up, John Roa.
Thanks for having me.
We're coming to you here from Studio 1873.
Astonishing 57% over 27 million.
So then, cheers.